In this video, we're going to show you how to make your first Kumiko panel using the Asa-No-Ha pattern. You'll need a set of Kumiko jigs, some Kumiko strips, a sharp chisel, and some sort of saw to cut the pieces to length. Let's go ahead and get started. So whether you've made your own or you've picked up my starter set, you're going to have a set of Kumiko jigs and Kumiko strips with a set that also has Kumiko Grid. The Kumiko Grid is just some of the Kumiko strips that have half laps cut out of them so they can interlock into a grid-shaped pattern that forms the base of your Asa-No-Ha panel. On the Kumiko jigs, you'll have three different angles. The first is your 45, the second is your 67.5, that one's repeated on the back of both blocks, and the last is your 22.5, very shallow angle. First thing we're going to do is open up our Kumiko Grid set. This is the one with all the half laps in it. And we'll simply overlap these and click them into place. Each of these strips is made of radiata pine. They are approximately 1/8 of an inch to 1/32 of an inch thick and 1/2 inch wide. And then the length is determined by what specific use it has. And each of these kerfs that you can see is going to match exactly the thickness of whatever Kumiko strip you're using. So 1/8 inch or 3/32 is going to be the most common, just because that tends to be the kerf of a traditional table saw board. And each of these is going to fit snugly. You can put a dab of glue inside each of the half laps here, but it's not necessary. And that same sentiment goes for everything throughout the pattern. At least with the Asa-No-Ha pattern, glue is not necessary. All of the pieces should fit together snugly and prevent from coming apart just through a friction fit. The first thing we're going to do in starting the infill pattern is insert these bisectors. These are simply a Kumiko strip that has a 45-degree bevel on all four ends. First, we're going to lay a Kumiko strip diagonally across the grid here and just mark the approximate length. Probably want to err on the long side by about 1/16. This doesn't need to be perfect. We're going to dial it in as we go here. Then we will take one of our Kumiko jigs, flip it upside down, and we're going to go ahead and make the first kerf on this using a square and our handsaw, and this will allow us to cut each of the pieces to length. You just want to cut low enough that you're below the channel, and then we're going to go ahead and slip this in. We'll cut our first piece to length. I'm going to flip this back over side after we've cut 4 or 5 of those. Probably want to keep a few extra just in case we end up a little short. These stops have 2 separate inserts, and that allows you to really get the full range of capacity on the jig. You see, if we had used this one, the maximum length is going to be about here, but as we move it back, that gives us quite a bit more range. We're going to place this in the channel just so that it's just sticking up above the bevel here. We'll push it to the back side. After we've locked it in place here, we'll push it to the back side Essentially, we're using this jig as sort of a shooting board. So this back fence is really what's going to prevent you from having tear out as you tear through it. When we're pairing our first piece here, we're going to hold the workpiece in place. And when we're pairing away here, we're going to take just a little bit of material at a time, slowly having the piece until your final pass is completely flush with the surface, using it as a reference face. Flip that over and do the exact same thing again. And you want to make sure there's no dust in here along the way. If you accidentally get any dust between the workpiece and the fence, it can be out of square. If you accidentally get any dust between the workpiece and the stop here, could cause it to end up a little short. And that's going to give us a workpiece with 45-degree bevels on all four corners here. And now we're going to test fit our piece. Hopefully it's a little long. Perfect. So if it's a little long here, we're going to go back to our jig, put it in place and use this as a reference, and we'll just loosen that stop, just nudge it up a little bit. Really want to pare away just a small amount at a time as you're making this adjustment. That way you don't end up too short. If we are too short, we're going to have to cut another piece and try again. Still a little longer. There we go. When you get a good fit, that's exactly what we want, right? Where it has a nice friction fit, and I can push it into place. It'll hold snugly, but doesn't deform this grid out of square. And now that we have that part done, we have the jig dialed in, this is where it actually gets pretty quick. We can go ahead and knock out several more without having to change the setting. And if we set it up correctly, all four of the rest of these are going to be the exact same. Next, we're going to start on the infill pieces. We'll accomplish that by laying a Kumiko strip diagonally perpendicular to those bisectors. That's going to help us find the center point. And then we're going to angle one piece from the corner here into about the halfway point between these 2 points. So I'll mark that roughly. And then we'll lay this over to get pretty good idea of where that's going to end up. And again, I'll err about a 1/16 along so we can dial it in. So once you have all your pieces cut to length, you'll need 16 of these, and I cut a couple extra just in case we short one accidentally. You're going to set up your 22.5 degree angle block here so that the stop pushes your workpiece just about halfway sticking out of the jig here, and we'll lock that in. Again, we're going to slowly pare away at the piece so we don't run into any tear out and get a nice clean cut. We'll flip that over on the same side and do it again so we get a good point there. And that's going to leave us with this. We're going to leave this side uncut for now. We'll come back and use both jigs at the same time to clean that part up and make the other half of this piece. But for now, we're going to go through and knock out the rest of these. now that we have all of those pieces cut for the first time, we're going to start on the other side of that piece, which is going to use both of the steep 16.5 degree angles. So we're going to push these stop blocks back to the other insert. That way, again, we're getting the full range out of them. And your jigs may or may not have this second insert. They may just be longer. Just kind of depends how they're made. Basically what we're shooting for here is a 67.5 degree angle that's offset. So whereas on this one you use the same stop on both sides, so the point is going to be in the center. On the 67.5, we're going to offset that a little bit by bumping one of these stop blocks back just about 64th to a 32nd of an inch. That's going to give us a slightly off-centered bevel. So the first one we will line up just again so it's about at that halfway point. Tighten that in place. And go ahead and pare that first one down. And then we're going to switch on to the second one here. And we'll line that up to the exact same spot. And then we'll actually bump it back just ever so slightly. Push the stop block up and we'll lock that in place. And if we've done that correctly, now we'll flip it over. Just a little bit more here. And that's going to give us this slightly off-centered bevel. After you've paired each of those pieces, we're going to insert them into the grid with the small bevel facing towards the bisector. Those large bevels are going to hold your keystone piece, and that's what we'll cut right now. Leave those in place, and we're going to take another Kumiko Strip, lay it directly across here, and get the approximate length for our keystone piece. As always, we're going to err a little bit long so we can dial it in. Once you've cut that to length, again here we're going to set up the 45 degree stop block, and for this one we're making the same piece that we made for the bisector. It's just going to be quite a bit shorter. This is the keystone that'll lock those other two infill pieces in place. And you want to be really careful on this one that you don't get your finger too close to the blade here. As you can see, it's very easy to slice your finger open. Now if we've cut it to the right length, it's going to have a nice snug fit that'll lock these two in place. If you're a little short, start again with a new piece. If you're a little long, go ahead and pare just a little bit off, dialing it in slowly but surely. And that's it. We're going to repeat this 7 more times. That'll be the entire Asa-No-Ha pattern. And there you have your finished Asa-No-Ha pattern. I
hope you had fun following along. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. If you're interested in my video on how to cut Kumiko strips or how to make the jigs if you haven't picked up a set yourself, I'll leave those links right here as well.